Hello there, my name's Gary Sims and this is Gary Explains. So today is one of those days when you wake up in the morning, you go online and you find some absolutely fantastic news that you weren't expecting. It just came out of the blue and you go, oh wow, that's fantastic. In this case, it's the launch of the Raspberry Pi 5. So if you want to find out more, please let me explain. Okay, so this is all very exciting and as often has come with these Raspberry Pi announcements, completely unexpected. I really wasn't looking that there was going to be a Raspberry Pi 5 this year at all. So what have we got? It's 2 or 3 times speed improvement over the Raspberry Pi 4, featuring silicon designed in-house for the best possible performance. We'll talk more about that in a minute. We've redefined the Raspberry Pi experience coming in October 2023, so it's available for pre-order now. We'll talk more about that in a moment. So here is the board, that credit card size board as we've seen on all the previous generations. You've got the pins up here along the top. Here down the side you've got USB and wired Ethernet. You've got HDMI down here. You've got USB-C for power here. Plus there's a whole load of other interesting stuff going on here in the middle that we're going to touch on as we go through this. This is the new processor. This is the new I/O chip. We'll talk more about that. This is the power chip. PCI Express. Let's just dive into some of the specs. So I've highlighted in yellow here the things that really kind of make a difference compared to the previous ones. Now we've got a new quad-core 64-bit ARM CPU. It's the Cortex A76. Of course, before we had the Cortex A72 running at 1.5 gigahertz. The new version is running at 2.4 gigahertz, and it's built using a 16 nanometer process, 512K per core L2 caches, and a 2 megabyte shared L3 cache. We've got the new Video Core 7 GPU supporting Open GLES 3.1 and Vulkan 1.2. We'll talk more about both of those in a minute. It can power 2 4K monitors at 60 frames a second. There's a built-in hardware H.265 decoder. That's excellent news because H.265, of course, is very popular nowadays, and having that built in hardware is absolutely fantastic. LPDDR4X RAM, 4 gigabytes or 8 gigabytes available at launch. There is the possibility, according to the little diagram on the board, of a 1 gigabyte and a 2 gigabyte version, and there's even rumors of a 16 gigabyte version. You've got dual band Wi-Fi, that means 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. You've got Bluetooth 5 and Bluetooth low energy. Now you've got the micro SD card slot as you've always had on these boards, but this one now supports UHS 1, so that means it's much faster than the standard model we've had before, which means if you've got a fast card, it means you can get some decent boot times and some decent I/O times. Now there are 4 USB ports. 2 of them are USB 3.0 and they support simultaneous 5 gigabits per second operation. Why is that? We'll talk more about that in a minute. There's this new chip, this new I/O chip, but basically getting full speed USB 3.0 ports at full speed for each port. So it's not 5 gigabits shared because there's some kind of shared controller. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then in fact there are 2 USB 2.0 ports, and again those are all full speed, so you can use all these at full speed, assuming of course the CPU can do what you want it to do. Gigabit Ethernet as we've seen before. Of course this will be using the new I/O pin, so full speed there, and 2 4-lane MIPI camera display transceivers, so you can either have 2 cameras, 2 MIPI displays, 1 MIPI display, 1 my camera, like that. Works brilliantly. And then of course we now have the PCI Express exposed via that ribbon cable. Okay, and it's a 1-lane one, and you are going to need some extra adapters or hats if you want to use that, but of course it sounds like there's going to be an M2 hat which will allow us to put an SSD on a kind of a separate hat and then plug it in via that ribbon cable and have it powered via PCI Express 2.0. Then we've got the need of 5 volts 5 amps USB-C with power delivery support, so that's different than the 3 amps that we had with the Raspberry Pi 4. So you are going to need a better power supply if you're going to run this thing at full speed. You've of course got that 40-pin header, and now you've got a real-time clock that you can plug in so it knows the time, powered by an external battery, and an actual power button, so you don't have to keep pulling out the USB cable or whatever. You can actually turn it on and off via a power button. So let's have a look at some of those individual things. So here is the new processor. So the Cortex A76 is 3 micro architectural generations beyond the Cortex A72, and the combination of these new cores and a higher clock speed, 2.4 GHz up from 1.4 GHz, and the smaller process, now 16 nanometers, makes this Pi 5 faster and more efficient, so 2-3 times faster than the Raspberry Pi 4. So it's going to be really interesting to see that. How well can you run a desktop? Can you actually really, do web browsing and everything, actually really make this an actual desktop experience? I'll tell you all about that when I get my board. Double the GPU performance. The new core, which was designed also in Cambridge, has full open source Mesa drivers, and you've got these expanded I/O capabilities, which we'll talk more about in a minute, and of course this possibility of connecting even SSDs, booting off FSDs via PCI Express. So what is this new custom chip? It's called the RP1, and it's a South Bridge. That basically means it offers the bulk of the I/O capabilities to the Raspberry Pi 5. So it's got USB 3 support. There's 2 USB 3.0 controllers, which is why you can run each port at full speed. And then there's another 2 USB 2 controllers, so 4 in total. So you're not actually relying on using a shared controller and sharing the bandwidth across the different ports. Each port has got its own kind of controller and can run at full speed. And if you look at this little diagram here you can see there's now a convenient way of knowing which board you've got, because they all look so similar when you look at them until you start maybe reading chip numbers or something. So this one lets me know this is the 8 GB version. There's a 4 GB version for sale at the time of launch, and they've built this board in such a way that there could possibly be 2 GB and 1 GB versions. And as I said, there is a hint that maybe there'll be a board revision with 16 GB available in the future. Anyway, carrying on with this chip here, also supports Gigabit Ethernet, also supports all the GPIO, supports the MIPI display and camera capabilities, and it's a 40 nanometer chip built by TSMC. So this is a custom chip built by Raspberry Pi just to deal with the I/O, and what a fantastic thing that is, because I/O of course really is the secret of the Raspberry Pi, and now we've got this powerful dedicated chip for handling USB and Gigabit Ethernet and so on. So absolutely brilliant step forward by the Raspberry Pi Foundation. But another interesting thing is this new chip, the DA9091, the dialogue chip. So this is codenamed Gilmore. It's a power management IC, and this is the USB-C connector here, and then there's this very clever chip here. And this has got 8 separate switch mode power supplies to generate the various voltages required by the board, including a quad phase core supply capable of providing 20 amps to power the Cortex A76 cores. So this is absolutely fantastic. So we've got this dedicated chip for the power, and it's USB power delivery compliant. So you can actually stick in a USB power delivery power supply. It can negotiate the right voltages, the right amps, and your board can get powered by that. You will need, as I mentioned earlier, the old board used to use 3 amps. Now you're going to need 5 amps if you want to run this at full power. It realizes if it doesn't quite get it, because of this chip can do all the negotiations, it realizes it's only got 3 amps, and it will slow things down, disable certain things, limit certain things so that you can still run the board, but really you need 5 amps, 5 volts to get that running. But because of this chip now, you've also got software accessible power monitoring, which means from within inside of the Raspberry Pi you can actually ask it questions about its power status. So again, a great advancement in the Raspberry Pi 5's design. Now, as you saw there, I was talking about 20 amps going through to the Cortex A76. So active cooling really is now becoming a must. It's not mandatory. You don't buy the board with active cooling built in. You can run it without it. It will start to throttle. It will start to do things slightly limitedly when the heat goes up, because the power is going up and the heat goes up. However, it will still run. It won't burn out. It won't catch fire or anything like that. It still will work. However, it is recommended that you do get a fan. So if you buy the official case, it comes with a fan built in. There's also an active cooling fan that you can put on. Now I've ordered the fan to go with my board. More about that in a moment. So I'll be able to tell you about the differences of how it works with or without the fan. Now these things are priced at $60 for the 5 GB variant. I think that's $5 more expensive than the Raspberry Pi 4 at 4 GB. $80, again $5 more, I think, if my memory serves me right, for the 8 GB version. Obviously euro and British pound prices and wherever you are in the world will change slightly. I've ordered mine apparently the first batches will ship on the 23rd of October. I think by the time it gets to me, because of postal delays where I live, I think it's going to be sometime in early November I'll get hold of mine. I have pre-ordered it. I've pre-ordered my board and I've pre-ordered a fan. So when I get those, expect more. Expect full comparisons with RISC-V and other boards from Rockchip and all that kind of stuff, even compared to, you know, the M1 Max and whatever. We'll give it a real good spin and I'll tell you all about it. Okay, so there you have it, the Raspberry Pi 5. Please do tell me in the comments below what things you'd like me to test when my board does arrive. What things would you like me to look at? Also tell me what you think about the Raspberry Pi 5. Will you consider getting one as well? Okay, that's it. My name's Gary Sims. This is Gary Explains. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see that video when my board comes, then make sure you subscribe to the channel. Okay, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.